It's still summer in New York, and I'm sitting talking to another Dave, who's also a creative director. He's also a bearded man. He's also a Brit. Dave Buonaguidi. Hello.
Hi. Welcome.
So, you're over to talk about on a panel about Brits over here, and are you talking about the state of the UK advertising scene?
I hope so, because I don't know anything about the state of any other scene around the world, but they're specifically asking me about what it is that keeps me awake at night, and
is it insomnia? Is it breathing issues?
Well, I've got in the presentation two of the other issues. I've got one of my next door neighbours who are a total bunch of wankers who don't really understand the concept that sound travels. So when they sit in the garden having a fancy dress party at 4 a.m, I'm down a terrace street. They don't understand that some people might have children, might be asleep, might not want to be listening to them trying to fuck each other and get off with each other, whatever it is they're doing. That's one of the issues. The other one is that my children have got a lizard called Gary, and they feed him little cockroaches and little locusts. But what they do is, because when they open the box to put the locusts in his container, sometimes they escape. And so we've now got 30 or 40 of these locusts running around the house, hiding in different places. But you can't actually find them until you turn the lights off. And then when you turn the lights off, they think it's night time, and they start chirping. So I've got this situation where the whole fucking house sounds like the Serengeti. But the thing I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is a very worrying state of advertising, which is that you've got this horrendous sort of vicious circle where the business has become very, very scientific. You know, the business I joined was a very creative business because there wasn't much data around, whereas now data is really, really important to the process. But we don't seem to be engaging with it anymore, and what we're doing as a result, we just sort of feel that the business has become really boring. As a result of that, there are no interesting people who want to join the business, who are going to make it interesting. So you've got this horrible knock-on effect, and as a result of that, there's this sort of standoff when we're stuck in this doldrums. Nobody is ever doing anything, and what's happening is lots and lots of these bigger businesses are starting to acquire all of the other small independent businesses, and everybody is just doing the same old shit, keeping their heads down, hoping that the storm will just go away and that something miraculous will happen, which it won't, because it kind of requires people standing up and going, you know what, we need to do something different and we need to change it. And I don't see that kind of happening, and that's the thing that really worries me, because I've been doing this for a long time, and the thing I've always enjoyed doing, and I've been lucky to have been part of, is to work in companies that really had that challenger mentality and went, you know what, fuck it, everybody does it like this, we're going to do it differently to give our staff a different alternative and to give our clients an alternative. Nobody is doing that, and even when I see companies starting now, I don't see that people starting with a creative missionary view. They start with a mercenary view, which is just, how can we do this for 5 years and make a load of money and then go and live in Lanzarote or whatever your dream might be. Yeah. And so it's a really, really big issue, and I don't know how to solve it. My question at the end is, do you go MacGyver and you try and be creative, or do you go Pol Pot and become very aggressive?
And it's particularly in the UK, where we were considered to be the most creative country for a long time.
Yeah.
I think we've probably lost that.
Oh, totally. To be honest, I think I was lucky enough to work for Jay Chiat in the 90s at Chiat Day London, and we had access to LA and New York, and you see the way that Americans do it. I think they historically have always been 10 to 15 years ahead of the curve in the UK. I think the worst thing that happened to the UK was that they started to be deemed to be the best place to be creative, and I think they were a very good place to be creative. And what happened was they just created this myth. They created this universe of creative awards, which I think has become a real cancer to the progressive nature of the business, because all we've done is we just think it's all about just reflecting what we in advertising think is brilliant advertising. It's incredible when you see what happens at Cannes, where you spend huge sums of money to be told by the people you work with that you're doing a good job. Yeah. I just find it incredible, and it's like somebody really needs to turn the fucking lights on and go, what the fuck are you doing? And stop worrying about the superficial bullshit side of the industry and take it and become more progressive and more interesting. But again, like I said, nobody seems to be doing it because they seem to be suckered into awards and all of the superficial shit that we've created. Whereas in the States, I think they have a different concept of service. You know, we are a service industry. Clients pay us to help them win. And when you have that responsibility, I think that should change the outlook and the way that you work with people. Whereas we still think, stupid clients pay us and we have to sort of do work that we don't really want to do for them, so we have to create awards things on the side that make it much more fun for us. It's just a really contorted way of looking at it. States, I think, have understood content, have understood mobile, have understood the consumer, have understood client needs much more quickly. And sure, I think the industry has changed dramatically from when it was in the 80s when I started, and certainly 70s and 50s, whatever, when the business started, where we were so reliant on creatives. But the analogy for me sort of seems to be almost like motor racing, where motor racing in the 60s and 70s was very sexy. People were always dying. It was always down to the driver, not the car. Whereas now, it's a procession. You get a German driver who is very efficient, doesn't make mistakes. He becomes as efficient as the engine that he's sitting on. And if he starts in first, he'll end in first, unless there's some horrendous mistake happens. And those things never happen. So you end up with a situation where it's much more predictable. But I think, how can you still excel within that? But nobody wants to do it.
It seems, when I look at work that comes from the States and compare it to work from London agencies, there's unashamed salesmanship in American work. And some of the stuff that I love is, the Allstate commercials, and it's the guy saying, "You'll be better protected from mayhem like me," and it's, if you're with Allstate, incredibly creative ads that win loads of awards, and just out and out sales. And there's such an embarrassment about sales within the UK. Why is that?
I think it's because we don't seem to think that you can be creative and effective. In America, they understand that if you're not effective, you lose, and if you lose, you're fucked. And it's a very, very simple. It's winners and losers in the States, and nobody wants to be a loser. And so what you have to do is understand and embrace the fact that you have to be a winner, and then you have to do what you got to do. Whereas in the UK, I don't think we really listen to our clients enough. We ignore them too much about what they genuinely want. We give them what we think they want. And, what do white middle-class men know about the rest of the world? White middle-class men only like hanging around with white middle-class men, and they like talking about things that they like talking about. The world out there is much more complex than that, and I think Americans, because they understand the concept of service and that whole mentality of how do I help my client to win, you have to understand your consumer much more, and I think they just do.
Yeah.
They've embraced it.
Yeah. Dave, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you. Nice to see you.